Queen Laura stood at the high window of the council chamber, looking out over the wide streets of the colony. The evening sun painted the sky in shades of orange and red. Far below, people moved about with hurried steps, their faces showing a mix of fear and hope. The threat from the unknown regions was growing every day. Traders spoke of strange ships seen near the border, and farmers whispered of burned villages in the outer lands. It had been weeks since the council agreed to send a message across the stars. The message was simple. It asked for help, for friends, for anyone willing to stand with them. Laura hoped that kind and wise allies would answer, bringing peace and trade, maybe even friendship. She knew her people were strong, but she also knew they could not fight this unknown enemy alone. Ethan walked through the crowded marketplace, his eyes scanning the goods laid out on wooden tables. He was not here to shop. His orders were clear. He had to keep watch and make sure no trouble started. People were nervous, and nervous people could cause problems. He was tall, young, and carried himself with the quiet focus of a soldier. When he passed, people gave him space. Claire was in the repair bay, her hands covered in oil as she worked on a damaged transport. She was one of the best engineers in the colony. Her job was to make sure the landing platforms and machines were ready for whoever answered the call for help. She did not care much about politics, but she cared about keeping people alive. She hoped that whoever came would be good people. The city was busy preparing. Workers carried supplies to the landing platforms. Guards trained in the yards until their arms ached. Children played in the streets, though their laughter sounded weaker than it used to. Everyone was waiting, wondering who would answer. In the council chamber, Queen Laura spoke with her advisors. They debated what gifts to offer the new allies when they arrived. Some wanted to show wealth and beauty, others wanted to show strength. Laura listened, but said little. Her mind was on the stories she had heard as a child, faraway worlds where people helped each other without asking for anything in return. Evening turned to night. In the barracks, Ethan cleaned his rifle, thinking about what was to come. He had never fought in a real war. The drills were hard, but they were nothing compared to facing a true enemy. He told himself he was ready, but deep down he was not sure. Still, he would do his duty. Claire walked home from the repair bay under the cold light of the moons. She passed the training yards and saw soldiers sparring. Their shadows moved like quick ghosts across the walls. She thought about the strangers who might soon land here. They'd be gentle traders or hard warriors she did not know. She only knew that change was coming. The next morning, the colony woke to bright light and clear skies. The air buzzed with quiet excitement. Queen Laura stepped onto the balcony and looked toward the sky. Any day now, she thought, help would arrive. She imagined ships with bright colors and banners filled with people smiling in friendship. She imagined handshakes, trade agreements, and laughter shared over warm meals. In the main square, Ethan met with Claire. They had been told they would be part of the welcoming team. It was their job to meet the arriving ships and guide their crews to the council hall. Ethan joked that maybe they would meet people from a world made of forests or oceans. Claire laughed, but her eyes showed worry. As the day went on, the air grew warmer. The workers checked the landing platforms again and again. Traders lined up stalls with fine goods, hoping to impress the newcomers. Children were kept close by their parents. The whole colony seemed to be holding its breath. Queen Laura sat alone in her private chamber for a moment of peace. She closed her eyes and whispered a quiet hope that the people who answered would be true friends. She did not know that far across the stars, a different kind of help was already on its way, help that would change everything. The sun had barely risen when the first watchman spotted the shapes in the sky. Dark and massive, they moved like shadows against the bright clouds. Word spread through the colony like fire. People ran to the streets, pointing upward. Some cheered, thinking help had come. Others grew silent, uneasy at the sight of the heavy armored ships. Queen Laura stood on the balcony of the council hall. She had expected bright ships with banners and open decks. These were different. The hulls were thick and scarred, the color of ash and steel. Each ship carried rows of weapons visible, even from the ground. They descended slowly, their engines shaking the air. Ethan and Claire stood at the edge of the main landing platform. Both were dressed in clean uniforms, ready to greet the visitors. As the first ship landed, the force of the engines pushed dust and wind into their faces. Ethan shielded his eyes, and looked toward the lowering ramp. Out of the ship came tall men and women wearing dark armor that looked worn from many battles. Their faces were marked with scars, their eyes sharp and watchful. The one in front walked with heavy steps and a strong posture. His name was Commander Jack. His presence seemed to make the air heavier. The people around the platform whispered among themselves. Some stepped back, unsure if these newcomers were truly here to help. The Deathworlders, as they were called in old stories, had a reputation for surviving the most dangerous places. They were said to fight without fear, but they were also known to bring war with them. Commander Jack looked over the gathered crowd. He did not smile. Instead, he gave a short nod to Ethan and Claire. "We received your message," Jack said in a steady voice. "We came because you are in danger. Your enemy is closer than you believe." Ethan glanced at Claire. She could see the same thought in his eyes. These people were not the peaceful traders they had imagined. Jack gave orders to his soldiers, who began unloading crates of weapons and equipment. They moved with speed and precision, paying little attention to the uneasy stares from the colonists. Queen Laura approached with her advisors. She stood tall, showing no fear, though her mind was racing. "We thank you for coming," she said. "We expected friends from far away. You seem ready for war?" "Your queen is wise," Jack replied. "War is coming whether you are ready or not. We will make sure you survive." The Deathworlders began spreading through the colony. They inspected walls, guard posts, and streets. They set up heavy gun positions near the gates and reinforced weak spots in the defenses. Some colonists tried to speak with them, but most of the Deathworlders said little. Their focus was on preparing for battle. Ethan followed a group of them to the outer wall. He was amazed by how quickly they worked. They carried large metal plates as if they were nothing, fixed cracks in minutes, and set up devices he had never seen before. Yet their methods were rough, and their presence made the local guards nervous. Claire worked in the repair bay when two Deathworlder engineers arrived. They examined her tools and machines without asking permission. One of them started fixing a damaged turret, his hands moving with practiced skill. Claire could not deny they were good at their work, but they acted as though the colony already belonged to them. That evening, the main square was quieter than usual. People gathered in small groups, talking in low voices. Some believed the Deathworlders were the only hope of surviving the threat. Others feared they would bring more trouble than they solved. Queen Laura met with Commander Jack in the council chamber. Candles lit the room, casting long shadows on the walls. "I must know," she said, "why you came so quickly." "Our message was meant for all who would listen." Jack leaned forward. "We listen faster than most, and we know the enemy you face. We will not spare you. We have fought them before. We know what they can do." Laura studied his face. It was hard and unyielding. She could not read his full intentions, but she sensed he was telling the truth. Outside, the Deathworlder ships loomed over the colony like dark mountains. They had come first, before any others could answer the call. And with their arrival, the fate of the colony had begun to change. Days passed, and the Deathworlders became a constant presence in the colony. They walked the streets in groups, their eyes always moving, scanning for threats. Their dark armor caught the sunlight and made them look like living machines. The colonists grew used to the sound of their heavy boots, but they could not decide if it was comforting or frightening. Queen Laura met with Commander Jack almost every morning. They spoke in the council chamber, where maps were spread out across the table. Jack explained where the enemy might attack, marking the weakest points in the colony's defenses. He did not ask for permission to make changes, simply gave orders to his soldiers, and they carried them out. This caused tension among Laura's advisors. Some believed the Deathworlders were protecting them. Others argued they were taking control. Laura listened to both sides but kept her decision to herself. She was watching Jack closely, trying to understand his true purpose. Ethan trained with the Deathworlder soldiers in the open yard. They taught him new ways to move, fight, and react. Their drills were harder than anything he had experienced. His muscles ached, and his hands were raw from the training weapons. Yet he noticed he was getting faster, stronger, more aware. One soldier, a tall woman named Riley, showed him how to fight in close quarters without giving the enemy a chance to strike back. She never smiled, but she respected effort, and Ethan gave her everything he had. Claire spent her days working alongside the Deathworlder engineers. They were skilled and efficient, using tools she had never seen before. One of them, A quiet man named Cole taught her how to repair a damaged shield generator in minutes instead of hours. Claire admired his knowledge but disliked how he ignored her suggestions. He worked like someone who believed there was only one right way his way. In the streets, tension simmered.
Oh.
Some colonists watched the Deathworlders with open admiration. They saw them as warriors who could stand against anything. Others avoided them, muttering that these outsiders were preparing for a war that might never come. Small arguments broke out in the market and the taverns. People asked why the Deathworlders had come first, before anyone else could answer the Queen's call. One afternoon, Queen Laura invited Commander Jack to walk with her through the main square. People stepped aside as they passed, their eyes following the pair. Laura asked, "Do you always take control when you arrive somewhere?" Jack looked at her. "If we wait for permission, people die. We act first, so there is something left to protect." "And when the danger is gone?" she asked. "Then we leave," Jack said, without hesitation. Laura nodded but did not reply. She wanted to believe him, but she knew words were easy. The Deathworlders began building new walls inside the colony, creating smaller zones that could be defended if the outer wall fell. The sound of construction filled the air day and night. Ethan helped with the work when he was not training. Claire fixed power lines and kept the machines running. Both noticed how quickly the colony was changing under the newcomers' hands. One night, Ethan stood on the wall with Riley, looking out at the dark hills beyond. "Do you think the enemy will really come?" he asked. "They always come," Riley answered. "The only question is when." In the repair bay, Claire worked late with Cole. They tested a new energy turret, its barrel glowing faintly in the dim light. "You think we'll need this soon?" she asked. Cole gave a short nod. "Sooner than you want." Rumors of movement near the border reached the colony. Traders reported seeing strange banners and armed patrols. The air grew heavier with each passing day. Laura increased guard shifts and ordered civilians to be ready for evacuation if needed. As the third week ended, the colony was no longer the same place it had been. The Deathworlders had changed it stronger, better defended, but also harder, less trusting. The Queen knew the people were waiting for her decision, to embrace these warriors as allies or push them away. But the enemy was drawing closer, and soon the choice might be made for her. The warning came at dawn. Scouts returned to the colony with reports of a large enemy force moving through the valleys. The warlords from the outer territories had gathered an army. Their ships and ground vehicles were spotted only 2 days away. The news spread quickly, and the colony shifted into full alert. Queen Laura stood in the council chamber, listening to the scout leader describe the enemy formation. They were moving fast, burning everything in their path. Her advisors spoke in urgent voices, suggesting retreat or hiding in the inner zones. Laura kept her eyes on Commander Jack, who stood silent at the end of the table. Finally, Jack spoke. "There is no hiding from them. If we run, they will chase us. If we wait, they will break your walls. The only way to survive is to meet them head-on." Some advisors objected, saying the colony's own forces were too small. Jack looked at Laura and said, "My people will fight with you. We will hold the line." Outside, the Deathworlders moved with speed. They strengthened the inner gates, placed heavy weapons along the walls, and set traps on the main roads leading to the colony. Ethan helped carry ammunition to the guard posts. Claire worked without rest in the repair bay, making sure every turret and shield generator was ready. Throughout the day, tension grew. Families gathered their belongings and moved to the safer zones near the Queen's Hall. Merchants closed their shops. The sound of hammers, drills, and marching feet filled the air. The colony was no longer a place of trade and laughter. It had become a fortress. In the training yard, Ethan faced Riley in a final sparring match before the battle. She struck hard and fast, forcing him to block and counter. "Remember," she told him, "stay close to your unit, trust your training, and never stop moving." Ethan nodded, sweat running down his face. He knew this was no longer practice, but the next fight would be real. That evening, Claire stood on the landing platform beside Cole. Watching as more Deathworlder troops arrived from the ships, they carried crates of weapons and armor, unloading with practiced rhythm. "Do you think we can win?" Claire asked quietly. Cole kept his eyes on the work. "We don't come to lose." In the council chamber, Laura met privately with Jack. "I need to know," she said. "Can you truly hold them back?" Jack answered without hesitation. "We'll stand until we fall, but we will not fall easily." Night fell, but the colony did not sleep. Watchmen scanned the hills with long-range scopes. Patrols moved through the streets, checking barricades and guard posts. In the distance, faint lights flickered on the horizon, the enemy's campfires. At first light, the enemy began to move again. Scouts reported that they were heading straight for the colony. The warlords had brought armored vehicles, siege weapons, and hundreds of fighters. Their banners could be seen even from the highest tower. Jack called the defenders together, Deathworlders. And colonists stood side by side in the square. "Today," he said, "we fight for this place. For every wall, every street, every person inside, there will be no retreat. If they break through, we hold the next line. If that falls, we fight in the streets. We'll make them regret ever coming here." The soldiers answered with a single shout, their voices echoing off the walls. Ethan gripped his weapon tighter, feeling the weight of the moment. Claire adjusted the settings on the shield controls, her heart pounding. By midday, the first enemy scouts reached the outer defenses. Gunfire broke the silence, and the battle began. Dust rose into the air as vehicles rolled forward. Deathworlders' heavy weapons roared from the walls, tearing into the enemy's front lines. Ethan fired alongside Riley, keeping his aim steady. Claire monitored the power grid, rerouting energy to the shields. As blasts hammered the walls, Queen Laura stood on the balcony, watching the fight unfold. She knew this was only the beginning. The main force had not yet reached them, and when it did, the real battle would decide the fate of her people. The main force of the warlords arrived by midday, their formations stretching across the hills like a dark tide. Their engines roared, and their banners whipped in the wind. The sound of drums carried over the land, a steady beat that grew louder as they advanced. On the walls, the defenders braced for impact. Deathworlders stood side by side with colonist soldiers, weapons ready. Commander Jack moved along the line, checking positions and giving short commands. Queen Laura stood at the central tower, her eyes fixed on the approaching army. The first wave hit hard. Enemy vehicles slammed into the outer barricades, explosions sending dirt and smoke into the air. Deathworlder heavy guns answered, tearing through metal and armor. Ethan fired from the wall beside Riley, his rifle kicking against his shoulder, aimed carefully, picking targets among the advancing troops. Inside the control center, Claire monitored the shield generators. Enemy fire pounded against the energy barrier, draining power faster than expected. She rerouted from non-essential systems, keeping the shields alive. Cole worked beside her, his hands moving quickly over the controls. "Keep it steady," he said. "We can't let it drop now." The battle grew fiercer. Enemy troops reached the walls, climbing with ropes and grappling hooks. Hand-to-hand fighting broke out on the parapets. Ethan blocked a strike from a warlord fighter, then countered with a sharp blow that sent the man tumbling. Riley moved like a storm, cutting down anyone who got close. An explosion shook the eastern wall. Part of the defense crumbled, and the enemy poured through. Jack rallied a squad and charged into the breach, meeting the attackers head-on. The clash was brutal, steel against steel, shouts and gunfire mixing in the chaos. Queen Laura sent orders to fall back to the inner defenses. The Deathworlders had planned for this, and new lines of barricades and gun nests were already waiting. Ethan and Riley covered the retreat, firing in short bursts as the others moved back. In the repair bay, Claire pushed herself harder.
Ow.
One of the shield nodes had taken a direct hit and was sparking violently. She grabbed her tools and ran to fix it under fire. Enemy rounds struck the walls nearby, but she kept working until the generator hummed back to full strength. The fighting moved into the streets. Narrow alleys and barricades turned every corner into a trap. Deathworlders fought with precision, using their knowledge of close combat to push the enemy back step by step. Ethan found himself side by side with Jack, covering each other as they advanced through the smoke-filled lanes. Hours passed, and the enemy's momentum began to slow. Their dead lay scattered across the streets, and their vehicles burned in black clouds. Still, they pressed forward, unwilling to retreat. Queen Laura refused to leave the command post. She stood over the maps, listening to reports from every sector. When she heard the enemy was breaking on the western flank, she ordered all available forces to strike there. Jack led the charge with Ethan close behind. They hit the enemy line hard, cutting through until the warlords began to pull back. By sunset, the battle was turning. The warlords had lost too many, and the defenders held their ground. The Deathworlders pushed them out of the streets, forcing them toward the open fields. Heavy guns roared one last time, scattering the remaining attackers. The warlords finally broke, retreating into the hills. The defenders stood among the ruins, exhausted but alive. Smoke drifted over the colony, and the air smelled of burned metal and dust. Ethan dropped to a step, his rifle across his knees. Riley stood beside him, breathing hard but unhurt. Claire emerged from the repair bay, her hands blackened from work. She smiled faintly when she saw Ethan alive. Jack approached Queen Laura. "It's done," he said. "For now." Laura looked at the battered walls, the wounded being carried past, and the faces of those who had fought. "You came first," she said quietly. "And because of that, we still stand." Jack gave a single nod. Without another word, he turned to his people, already preparing for the next fight. The Deathworlders had kept their promise, and the colony would never forget it.